Welcome to part 5 of our live training session here with our sport front-wheel drive Acura Integra running on an Emtron SL8 standalone ECU. In the last tutorial, we worked through the cold start process, making sure the engine's able to crank, fire, and run and come up to an appropriate air fuel as it's warming up. We know that when the engine's warm, everything's been dialed in at idle. So we validated our fuel and airflow model at idle conditions. Now we're ready to take a look at the process, moving into the part throttle cruise area of driving. So we're gonna be looking at how to calibrate the fuel and the spark timing, as well as taking a look at setting up our O2 transport delay to make sure that the closed loop functionality will be performing correctly and be able to rely on it for making our adjustments in our fuel delivery or for any kind of long-term updating and correction as the vehicle runs in all kinds of conditions. We're gonna have a lot to cover. Let's jump in so we can check this out. Welcome back to our live training session here with our sport front-wheel drive Acura Integra. Now in our last tutorial, we looked at the cold start, dialing that in, making sure the cranking fuel, the post-start, the warm-up enrichment were all good. We know at this point, everything has been validated in terms of our air and fuel modeling at our idle area of operation. So from roughly 0 to 2,000 RPM and from 0 to 100% in the efficiency calculation. Now what we're going to be focusing on this tutorial is how to dial in our part throttle area of driving. Now this car isn't going to spend much time in the part throttle area, so it's not super important, but I want to go in and cover how to do this regardless if it's a drag car or if it's a road-based car, street-going car, that you're able to follow the exact same process in order to dial in your part throttle fuel and spark. And what we're going to be doing here in this tutorial is looking at how we can dial in our volumetric efficiency table here from roughly 0 to 100%. So this is going to be the part throttle area of driving. We're going to be using the closed loop correction to guide us in making our updates and changes. We're also going to be taking a look at how to dial our spark timing in within the same area of operation. And when we built our spark timing table, if we go to ignition, main ignition table, from 0 to roughly 100 kPa and manifold pressure, this is looking at manifold pressure and not on efficiency calculation, we have set the values here at roughly 20 degrees. Now this is under what we should have for spark timing, but this allows me to have safe operating conditions to dial in my fuel in first, and then we can jump into the spark timing and start to further calibrate and tune this. We're going to be using the chassis dyno. I'm going to show you a technique of finding maximum brake torque on a chassis dyno. On a drag car like this, you really need to get it on a chassis dyno. There's not much way to dial this in at the track or driving it around. You do have some options for spark timing optimization. If you don't have a drag car, if it's more of a street-going car, there is a technique I'll discuss at that point in the tutorial of how to dial in your spark timing. We can pay attention to some details, specifically looking at throttle position and vehicle speed to determine making our spark timing updates. But I'll talk about that later in the tutorial. Now, in addition to this, we have a couple other topics that we need to cover. This is also going to be including, in this tutorial, injection timing. The injection timing is where we're telling the fuel injector to start its spray point within the auto cycle. We can further optimize this once we've dialed in our main VE table and our main spark timing table. We can jump into the injection timing, look at the process of how to adjust the values in that table, and then it'll help us further optimize things. Usually you're going to go after fuel economy. On a car like this, we could go after maybe a little bit smoother drivability with the fuel injector size that we're dealing with. It's pretty large, it's relatively unlinear at low pulse widths, so this may add to the drivability on a large injector. There's a couple different ways we can work with the injection timing, and we'll get into that a little bit later again in the tutorial. Lastly, what we're going to be also taking a look at is once we've dialed in our fuel table here, so once we've dialed in the main VE table, once we dial in the spark timing table and all that's been sorted out, we need to take a look at something called our O2 transport delay. This is going to account for how long it takes for the actual lambda to move from the value that it's at to the new target value. So it's going to be the transitional period in time that we need to account for, so it improves our closed loop tracking and improves the closed loop control. So we're going to be diving into that as well. We may be adjusting some of our closed loop PID gains for our O2 correction or the fuel correction, depending on how they respond and what we're seeing in terms of our air fuel and our short-term correction. As long as it's stable, then we can leave the values alone in our PID gains. But if we're finding that it's a little bit erratic, as we found in our warm idle video when we were dialing everything in on a warm engine, we adjusted some of the PID, specifically the proportional gains, to slow down the correction. We may or may not have to do that when we're calibrating in our part throttle optimization process here. So we're really going to be focusing probably 2,000 RPM to roughly maybe 7,000 RPM in this range. That's the area that we're gonna be able to really calibrate here on the dyno. We can carry anything that we've essentially built out from 7,000 RPM. We can carry it through the rest of the table up to 10,500. And the part throttle, that includes fuel and spark, that'll get us close enough in those ranges. We're really not gonna spend any time there. It's not so much of a concern, but what we'll find is that we do have to still calibrate this big chunk of the table right here. So that's essentially our area that we're going to spend the most time driving. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.